Our header is free. Freedom! Freedom! Here we are, back with another install. We have the Killer Bee oil pan that we're installing on the car, so we're just going to jump right into it. I don't want to spend too much time going over the minute details that we've gone over in the past. We will touch on the differences between the Killer Bee one and the factory oil pan when I get it out so we can compare. We're doing the oil pan, the windage tray, and the pickup, all for the tune. This is the last thing we need to do, so we're going to get the pitch stop, unbolted, go down under the car, unbolt the motor mounts. We're gonna drain the oil out, jack up the engine a little bit, and start pulling this guy out. So I'm gonna jump into it. I'm gonna start unbolting this pitch stop mount so we can get going on this. If you've never unbolted your pitch stop before, it's really easy. There's gonna be a 14mm bolt right under the throttle body. If you have a top mount, you're gonna have to take it off to get to it. Since we have the front mount now, we're just gonna jump right into it. It's gonna be extremely simple. Pull out the 14, loosen the back 14, and just rotate the pitch stop up a little bit, and that'll break it loose for us. Whoop! Little 14 out of the car. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. The next thing I need to do is pull the bumper off the car so that way I can get to the oil pan, just because I have that full splitter that runs under the car. You guys have seen me take my bumper on and off enough times, so I'm not going to walk through the process or show you guys how to take this thing off. So I'm going to get the bumper pulled off, we're going to get the camera back, and then we're going to start pulling off that oil pan. Now that we've got the bumper off the car, we need to take out this secondary air compressor here. There's going to be a 12mm bolt on each side of it, and then there's going to be one hose on the back side of where I have my intercooler piping. The reason we need to take this off is to be able to get this dipstick loose, so that way when we take the oil pan off, we can pull that guy out. So we're going to get these pulled off real quick. Alright, now that we've got the compressor out of the way, it gives us access to get the dipstick bolt off, which is right here, that little 10mm down there. So we're gonna unbolt that, and that'll allow us to get this guy out once we get the oil pan out. I'm gonna knock out that 10, then we're gonna jump under the car and start tackling the oil pan down there. Aha! Dipstick oil bolt is out. Jesus! So our oil dipstick guy is free to move around as he pleases now. So with this guy loose, all loosey-goosey, we're going to jump under the car and start getting some of those oil pan bolts off. While we've been doing this, I let the oil drain, so that way we didn't have to. If you don't know how to drain your oil, there's one 17mm plug down there. I'll show you once we hop down there how to drain the oil if you don't know how to. Alright peeps, here's under your car. This is going to be your header. And then there's your oil pan right there. That paper towel that's sticking out right there, that is going to be where your oil drain plug is. And then right up here is where your oil filter is. I just pulled mine off to let this drain because it's going to take a little while so it doesn't, just so it doesn't keep dripping on me, because I don't want to be dripped on by that guy. So we're going to let that guy drip. I want to try to do this oil pan without taking off the header. I think it's going to be possible. I've done it before, but last time I did it, I took off the header. So we're going to try to leave the header on and get around these bolts. If we need to take it off, we will, but I don't have gaskets for these. Luckily, Subaru is like 2 blocks away from me, so I can walk there tomorrow because I have tomorrow off work. So we're going to let this drain for a little bit and then come back and start disassembling the bolts that hold the oil pan up to the engine. Don't you just love it when we're under the car? So right now we've got a paper towel shoved in the oil cooler so it doesn't drip. Paper towel in the oil pan so it doesn't drip on me. And now under here, you've got all these bolts holding in the oil pan, so let's see if I can get a shot. So we've got 2 right there, whoop, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever. So they go all the way around the oil pan. You can get them all except for the 4 in the back. You can kind of see the head of that one poking out back there. If I can get the light back there, bam, right there. Right there, that guy. So with that, we're going to have to unbolt the motor mounts from down here, which are going to be these 2 14s. There's one on each side. After we unbolt those, we're going to jack up the transmission to give us access to get those ones back there. Those are going to be the last ones that we do. So we're going to go around and start pulling all of the 10mm off that we can, And then once we get all of these ones out, we're gonna jump back there and start pulling those guys out. We're gonna need a wobbly do to get back there, a wobbly do. So with our wobbly do, we'll be able to jump back there and get all those guys. We're gonna take our 14, undo the 2 motor mount bolts that I pointed out earlier. They're not on there very tight. So grab your 14, pull them out, and we'll get Chooch in here. And 2. Now that we've got those 2 bolts out, we're gonna grab the jack, a couple pieces of wood, and we're going to jack the transmission up. I'm gonna jack it up, and then I'll bring the camera back and show you guys where I did it at. So as you guys can see, I just got the transmission jacked up with that 4x4. And if you come down here, you look at it from the side, the transmission oil pan is right behind it. And let me get this in focus. The transmission oil pan is right behind it. You want to go right in front of the transmission. You want to make sure you're not hitting any lines, anything that could damage the trans. These are expensive. Don't break this. So I used a 4x4 with the jack right above the transmission pan. And then let me grab this flashlight here. So as you can see, that gave us a lot more room up behind the pan to get the 4 bolts that were in the back. I just pulled them out. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, it's so hard to film under the car, guys. So I just got the 4 out behind the oil pan. I used an extension. So I used a series of 1/4 inch extensions with a 10 and a wobbly do, and they came out no problem. Very easy. So now that we've got this, what we need to do next is get the pan off the block. So this is held on there with a OEM gasket adhesive. So I have a small scraper paddle. I'm gonna go up above the header up here, slide under the pan and start separating it from the block. So I'll probably time lapse this as I'm doing it, but we're gonna tackle this from a couple different ways, so we'll see. Well, I'm gonna be honest, this sucks. I have to take the header off, which is annoying. It's a it's a series of 12mm bolts and then 14mm bolts that hold it to the heads. So I need to start ripping off all of these heat shields. I'm gonna have to put them back on because I don't want my headers to heat soak everything. So I'm gonna time lapse me going through and pulling this header off. I'm not looking forward to this. So you might be wondering, Tanner, I've never pulled a header off. Well, it's quite simple, my friends. So there's a series of these 12mm bolts going all the way around the header that hold the heat shields onto this. Once we get that off, we need to disconnect the up pipe, which is 2 14mm bolts, and then there's a series of 14mm bolts that hold the header to the heads of the car. So I'm gonna go around, I'm gonna start pulling all these bolts off and get this header pulled off the car, so that way we get that oil pan off. The reason I need to pull the header off is I have no room to get a putty knife or a scraper or anything in here to break the seal between the oil pan and the block. So unfortunately, you gotta do what you gotta do. Alright. Our header is free. Freedom! Freedom! Alright. Now that we have the header off the car, I have access to get a scraper up in here and start pulling off this oil pan. I'm gonna jump on that and start getting this guy off. The thing to get this oil pan off is a putty knife, and you gotta slide it up against the block to get it started. I've already gotten it in once, and then once you have it started, I'm using a 3/8 ratchet, the heavy side, and just pounding it in. I've been working at this oil pan for a minute. So what I've done is I have a putty scraper up here against the block itself just so I don't score it. Then I've got a small flathead between the oil pan and that scraper. So I've been smacking them with this 3/8 ratchet and the oil pan is about to come off. So I'm gonna beat it a little bit more with this guy and hopefully this guy comes off. We're free! We're free! The oil pan's free! So we gotta slide this guy out now. right here on the oil cooler. And there's our oil pan, guys. So our oil pan's hanging out. I'm gonna clean off my hands. I'll grab the camera and I'll show you what's going on up here. Well, bam. There's our inside of the engine. So right there, that tube coming down, that tube coming down right there is the straw or the oil pickup. So the factory ones are really prone to breaking. That small tray up there is the windage tray, and that's to keep oil from splashing back up into the crankcase housing. And then of course we have our oil pan right here. So what we're gonna do is there's 2 bolts on the top of that pickup right there, and then 1 on that mounting point. We need to take those off. Those are gonna be 10 millimeters. And then we need to take that windage tray off. Once we get that pickup off, we can take the oil pan out, because as you can see, it's kind of baffled in there, so it holds it in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out those three 10 millimeters and then take off that windage tray, and we'll get these pulled out. We can compare them against the Killer Bee stuff. And there is our windage tray out of the car. We'll go over these components here shortly. Oh my gosh. I'm so oily! It's everywhere! My Subaru friends. Here we have the factory windage tray, which is garbage. So there's 6 mounting holes to take this off. I couldn't get the camera up in there, but you've got 2 on the back on each side, 2 in the middle, and then 2 in the front. They're all 10 millimeter bolts. They're not torqued down tight. They're easy to pull out. The pickup, like we were talking about, same thing. It's got 2 bolts on the top, 1 on the side. I'm dripping oil everywhere. Let's shove that guy back in there. But it's so difficult to film with oil everywhere by yourself. So with the new stuff, we have 2 pickup points on this guy in the back, 2 in the front. We already have our O-ring on there. It comes pre-installed. We have our windage tray, which has 4 mounting positions, 1, 2, 3, 4, and all good to go. So before we even think about putting that pan on, we're gonna go ahead and actually we're gonna go down here and we're gonna clean off the old seal that's on the oil pan. So I got some brake clean and a couple razor blades. We're gonna go down there, scrape all the old stuff off so that way we can get a good seal. So I'm just gonna go around with the oil pan connected with a small razor blade and start getting off all that old gasket. It comes off pretty easy. You don't really need any solvents or anything to pull this off. Try not to get it in your eyes though, because it kind of sucks. And it's just falling around everywhere. So I apologize for the awkward angle, but we just got our oil pan area sealing spot cleaned. So I used a razor blade and then a little bit of brake clean on a rag, as you guys saw me doing. So let me do a flip move here. It might be upside down, but we'll live. As you can see, there's a little bit of residue going around it still, but for the most part, it's just surface. There's nothing actually on here anymore. So you're gonna want to get that as clean as you can, so that way when we go to put the oil pan back on and seal it up, it's gonna have the best possible seal. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the windage tray and the oil pickup installed up in here, and then we're gonna get the pan sealed and get that up, start bolting it in, and then start reassembling everything else. We're going to get these factory bolts up in here. We're just gonna start them by hand for now on this windage tray. So we're gonna get that lined up, get this back bolt in. So now that we've got our windage tray held up here, we're gonna do the oil pickup. So we're gonna jump over to the pickup, and we've got these blue 30 millimeter Allen keys. We're gonna get those lined up, and those are gonna be the bolts that hold the pickup in. So there's only one way for this pickup to go in, so you can't really mess up the orientation of it. But I highly advise you don't cross thread these, because you're gonna hate your life if you do. So we're just gonna get these 2 started. So we've got one right there. I'm gonna jump over to this other one, get these lined up, and get this guy started. Now that we have these guys ready to go, we're ready to put in the next series of bolts, which is the spacers and these 25mm black hex keys. So the spacers have a small ledge on them. When you get them in packaging, you'll see, but it's a tiny little ledge on the end of it, and they have an orientation. So the passenger side is going to face with the ledge facing the front of the car. And I'll orient these after I get these started. And then the driver's side is going to face the inside of the car. So the little spacer, then the bolt goes through, and then that guy threads in. So we'll get these started, orientate them, and then tighten everything down. Alright, so we've got those tightened down. So with our pickup and the windage tray in place, we're gonna hop over to the oil pan and go put a seal around it so we can get that guy thrown up into the car. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to seal our oil pan. Today we'll be using the lovely RTV Black, Ultimate Black, made for oil pans. So, get this guy open. Take off the cap. Use the cap, puncture the seal. Bloop. Toss that over there. Put on our squeezy tip guy. And we've got our RTV Black. So what we're going to do here is we're going to just boop, cut that tip off. We don't need that. So when it comes to putting a sealer on this oil pan, I'm going to go right in the middle. I'm going to do a little bit at first. I'm going to seal it up, smooth it around, and then go back around with another layer. So that way we have good coverage. We don't want any oil to seep out of these bolt holes. That's a no-no. So we're going to get this guy sealed up. Bam. For that, we've got our oil pan seal ready to go. So we're gonna hop under the car and get moving on getting this guy in the car. Many apologies. I had to rush and get this thing in before the seal started to cure. So all we've done is slide the oil pan up in, and now we are putting in the hardware to hold it in place. So we're just gonna go around, start putting these bolts in to hold this guy up. We're not going to tighten them or torque them down yet. We're just gonna get them in place and keep pushing on through this install, which honestly I'm no longer enjoying. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, dude, that was awful. Getting these back 4 bolts behind the oil pan took me an hour. So we got it in though. Finally, I'm going to throw the motor mount bolts back in. We just set the engine down. So I'm going to get these two 14s thrown in and tighten down. Actually, I'm going to tighten those down. I'm going to tighten everything down once. So with those in, now I got to throw the header on, which is absolutely awful to do. This thing's heavy. So I'm going to get the header thrown on. We'll start reconnecting everything else here back up. And there you have it, everyone. The most awful install you could ever do to yourself. Once again, I don't recommend this to anyone who's a beginner in cars. Slightly past beginner. I consider myself intermediate. If we're going off of tiers here, I'd say I'm like intermediate, between intermediate and like decent. But that was awful. I got it done, but I don't ever want to do it again. So we got oil in the car now. We got everything buttoned back up, the bumper's back on. I'm not going to start the car until tomorrow to let that seal cure. It's got a 24-hour full cure time on it. It's got a 1-hour set time, but just be on the safe side to make sure that it adheres all the way. I'm not going to end up starting the car. But anyways, if anyone has any questions, this was absolutely awful. It was very difficult to get any footage because there's oil absolutely everywhere, and I didn't want to be touching the camera too much with oil all over my hands. This is difficult to do by yourself, so I'm working with what I got, but hopefully it's helpful to someone. Anyways, Appreciate everyone swinging by. Appreciate the time you spend on the channel. If you got any feedback, feel free to drop it in the comments below. We go get dyno tuned tomorrow. I am ecstatic. There's not going to be an upload on Saturday since I will be at Surgline, so we'll have the dyno video out on Monday. Anyways, I appreciate everyone swinging by. If you haven't already, subscribe to the page, like the video if it helped you. Aside from that, peace out.